We're going to be talking about how to write an introductory paragraph. Now, with an essay, when we're writing an essay, the intro, of course, is what leads us into the body of the essay. So we want to talk some strategies of how do we do that with the different essay prompts that we have. So prompts come in all shapes and sizes, but most of them ask you to argue something. It could be a theme or a character development. All kinds of things can come into play. So what I did was I took a popular book, To Kill a Mockingbird, and I just did a Google search, To Kill a Mockingbird essay prompt. And this is the first thing that came up, and you see that I got quite a variety of prompts here, but you can see they're all thematic essay topics. So theme essay topics are very popular. Also character development, how a character changes in the novel, are also very popular. So we're just going to take one of these because you can look at a prompt and you can apply the principles a bunch of different ways. So let's look at number 2, the necessity of empathy. Empathy being feeling compassion and sorrow or understanding for someone else's situation. So this says, according to Atticus, you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. Since I read this book, I know that this is him trying to teach his daughter how to have understanding for someone else when she doesn't really understand or get them. So the follow-up question after the quote is, how is this empathy towards others demonstrated or learned by characters such as, and then it lists characters. So this could be a theme essay, this could be a character development. So you could have a theme essay like this, which is, how does empathy and compassion show up in To Kill a Mockingbird? It could be a character development. How does Scout learn to be more empathetic and compassionate to other characters in the novel? Or like a life lesson essay. How does Atticus teach his children to be more empathetic? So it could go a lot of different directions, and that's probably true with most prompts. So I'm going to copy this, right? And then I'm going to go ahead and close that, and we're going to work on it here. I'm going to put that essay prompt into here so we can talk about it. All right? Now, intro basics. These are rules of thumb. A rule of thumb simply means it's a guiding principle. Are all intros the same? No. Depends on how and what you're writing about. This is a literary analysis essay, so the intros need to have a few components. Doesn't really matter necessarily what order, but there's some traditions that you should be aware of. But what needs to happen in an introductory paragraph to get us to the point where we can then write our body paragraphs? Well, a few things. Number 1, you have to introduce the topic that's being talked about. All right? In this case, right, we are saying that we're talking about empathy. All right? This idea of empathy, or how someone develops empathy, or how someone is taught. So in this case, we have to talk about and introduce this idea of empathy. All right? So introduce idea of empathy. I'll make this a little bit bigger just to be fair. This is, there we go. All right. Second thing you have to do when you're writing about a novel is you have to introduce the novel. All right? And the last thing is you have to state your thesis. So these are the 3 things that have to happen. You have to know the topic that you're writing about, you have to know the tie-in with the book or novel, and then you have to explain, what is this essay going to prove? What are we going to show in this essay? And that's just the intro. All right, so introduce the idea of empathy. There's a couple ways you could do that. You could just make a general statement about how we as people, as we learn and grow, it's important how we have compassion for other people's situation, or maybe for people less fortunate than ourselves. Some people start with a quote. Like this quote is not a bad quote to start with. So if we wanted to do that, right, this quote in itself introduces empathy. So we could just start it off with, right, Atticus Finch, To Kill a Mockingbird. And I could put the page number, but I don't know it. If I was writing the essay, you can bet I would find out. All right? So like that, To Kill a Mockingbird, because the title is underlined. So once we've done this, we still have to introduce this idea. We have to explain this quote. Why are we using this quote? All right, so we might say something like, right, parents often see the value of instilling empathy, compassion for others in their children. All right. Again, this is a rule of thumb, basic idea. My first reaction to this prompt. I have to now introduce the novel. So of course, I want to say in the novel, To Kill a Mockingbird. We usually want to state the author by, and I happen to know it's Harper Lee. And so now how do I tie in this general idea about empathy and compassion into the actual novel? How do we see this in the novel? Atticus Finch makes great effort to instill the, no, we already said instill, right? To foster sympathy and care for others in his children. Okay, so now I've tied together the topic and the novel. And now I'm ready to get to my main thesis. I can do a couple more sentences either way for these, but you want to have at least a minimum of 3 sentences and maybe about 50 plus words for an introductory paragraph before, as you head into your main thesis. All right, so my main thesis, I need to be able to say something about how Scout learns empathy. Okay, so we're going to say, we're going to make this partly character development. Atticus's daughter, Scout, learns to see, and now again, to see situations from other people's perspective in order to better understand their plights, which is a plight is a situation you find yourself in. All right, so now I have something to prove that Scout is learning to adjust her individual perspective to include other people's perspective so that she can feel for them and understand where they're coming from. All right, so I started off with a quote, which you don't have to do. I could just get rid of that quote, right here. I could get rid of it, and that's still an introductory paragraph. A quote, really not necessary, but it kind of brings in the novel to beginning, kind of this important concept. And now I've kind of set it up where I can go in a couple different directions in my body paragraphs, right? I could talk about particular people that she learns, how to be compassionate for. She, like for Boo Radley and for Mayella Ewell, and maybe for her teacher. I could maybe see a progression of where she doesn't know how to do that at the beginning of the novel to how she knows how to do it by the end of the novel. So it's this idea, though, is when we talk about an introductory paragraph, you have to start with your prompt. You have to boil it down to, what is this asking me to do? Is it thematic? Is it topical? Is it character development? You have to figure out what the topic is. You have to tie the novel into that. And you need to be able to arrive at a thesis that you're going to be able to talk about in multiple paragraphs. So this is just an example of one way to approach a prompt and be able to address what it's asking you to do in a fairly straightforward manner to get a basic introductory paragraph.